The clatter of fine china and the low hum of expensive conversations were the soundtrack to Ilara's life. For 2 years, this was her world. The starched white apron, the discreet black dress, the practiced, gentle smile. She moved between the tables of the Gilded Spoon, a ghost in a 5-star universe, refilling water glasses topped with lemon twists and delivering plates of seared scallops that cost more than her weekly rent. She had chosen this anonymity. She craved it like a starving woman craved bread. Here she wasn't Ilara Vance, the prodigy, the weapon. She was just Leah, the waitress who was quick on her feet and never forgot a face. It was a fragile, beautiful piece. Tonight that piece was being systematically dismantled by the man at table 7. Julian Croft was a man sculpted from arrogance and old money. He wore a Brioni suit that probably cost more than her car, a Patek Philippe watch that gleamed with condescension every time he gestured, and a smirk that seemed permanently etched onto his face. He was a piranha in a shark tank, loud and unnecessarily vicious, treating the staff not as people, but as inconvenient pieces of furniture that happened to be ambulatory. He'd sent back his wine 3 times, complaining about tannins and temperature with the theatrical flair of a man who'd learned about wine from a blog post that morning. He'd snapped his fingers at her twice. Ilara had absorbed it all with the placid grace her new life demanded, her professional smile a dam holding back a turbulent ocean. The final insult came with the main course. As she placed a plate of Wagyu steak before his date, a woman with surgically perfected boredom in her eyes, Croft shifted his leg abruptly, knocking the heavy bottle of Chateau Margaux from Ilara's service tray. It wasn't an accident. Ilara's senses, honed by a lifetime she fought to forget, had registered the minute, deliberate tensing of his calf muscle a split second before the movement. He had done it on purpose. Crimson liquid exploded across the pristine white of her apron and blouse, a violent splash that felt like a slap. The wine, cold and sticky, soaked through to her skin. The entire section of the restaurant fell silent. Gasps rippled through the nearby tables. Croft leaned back, the smirk widening into a grin. "Clumsy girl," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "This is what happens when you hire amateurs. That's a $2,000 bottle of wine you just wasted." He pulled out a thick, monogrammed wallet. He peeled off a single crisp $100 bill and held it out between 2 fingers, as if offering a treat to a dog. "Here, for the dry cleaning, and a little extra for your troubles. Try to be more careful with the next table's vintage." The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up her neck. It wasn't the wine or the money. It was the public spectacle, the deliberate degradation. He wanted to show everyone that he could ruin her, stain her, and then buy his way out of it with an insultingly small sum. He wanted her to feel worthless. He wanted her to know her place. Her manager, a kind, perpetually flustered man named Marco, started rushing over, his face pale with apology. "Mr. Croft, I am so sorry, sir. Please, allow us to—" Ilara held up a single steady hand, stopping Marco in his tracks. Her eyes, which had been downcast and deferential all evening, lifted to meet Julian Croft's. The practiced, gentle smile was gone. In its place was a stillness that was far more terrifying. The air around their table seemed to drop several degrees. "Keep your money," she said, her voice low and perfectly clear, devoid of the tremor she felt in her soul. Croft chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Oh, playing proud, are we? Don't be a fool. Take the money. It's more than you'll make in a week, sweetheart." He was still holding the bill out. Ilara didn't look at it. She looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time he saw something there that wasn't fear or subservience. He saw an abyss. "You have no idea who you're talking to," she whispered. The words meant only for him. She turned, her back straight, and walked away from the table, leaving the $100 bill fluttering in his grasp. She ignored Marco's frantic calls, the stares of the other patrons, the triumphant sneer on Croft's face. She walked through the swinging kitchen doors, past the startled chefs and dishwashers, and into the cramped, windowless staff locker room. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so profound it felt like a physical poison. The life she had built, the quiet, the normalcy, he had shattered it with a careless, cruel gesture. He had reminded her that in his world, people like Leah were nothing. She leaned against the cool metal of a locker, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The smell of bleach and old food did little to calm her. She closed her eyes. She had one rule in this new life: never go back, never reach for the tools of the old one. But Julian Croft hadn't just spilled wine on her. He had declared war on her dignity. He had pushed her past a line she had sworn never to cross again. Her hand went to her neck, her fingers closing around the small silver pendant she always wore. It was a simple, elegant piece, a stylized starburst. To anyone else, it was a piece of jewelry. To her, it was a ghost, a promise, a last resort she had prayed she would never need. Her thumb found the tiny, almost invisible indentation on the third point of the star. She pressed it once, twice, a third time in a precise rhythmic sequence. It was a code, a key. For a moment, nothing happened. The only sound was the frantic beating of her own heart. Doubt crept in. Maybe after 2 years, it was deactivated. Maybe he had finally let her go. Then a faint, almost subliminal click sounded in her ear. A tiny receiver, disguised as a hearing aid and dormant for 24 months, sprang to life. A calm, familiar voice, filtered through layers of military-grade encryption, spoke directly into her mind. "Spectre 1, we read you. Signal is live. Threat assessment required. Do you copy?" Ilara opened her eyes. The reflection staring back at her from the small locker mirror was no longer Leah, the waitress. The fear was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. The woman in the mirror was someone else entirely. She was Ilara Vance. "I copy, Kyle," she breathed, her voice a ghost of its former self. "Threat assessment, hostile. Target is Julian Croft, Table 7. Sanction level, psychological warfare. I want to break him." "Understood, Spectre 1. Asset deployment in 5, 4, 3. Ilara pushed herself off the locker. She unbuttoned the stained blouse, tossing it into a laundry bin. Underneath, she wore a simple black camisole. She smoothed her hair, her movements economical and precise. The trembling was gone, replaced by the steady hand of a surgeon. 2. The voice in her ear continued, "Assets are in position. Overwatch is green across the board. We are go on your command." She took one last look in the mirror. "Execute," she said, and with that single word, she walked back out into the restaurant, not as a victim, but as the angel of Julian Croft's own personal apocalypse. The atmosphere in the Gilded Spoon had shifted. The initial shock of the incident had faded into a tense, awkward murmur. Julian Croft was holding court, regaling his date with a louder, more boastful version of the story. He had painted himself as the magnanimous victim of incompetence, the bigger man who had offered a generous tip even after his suit was endangered. He was basking in the attention, a predator puffing his chest after a successful, if minor, kill. Marco, the manager, hovered nearby, wringing his hands, trying to decide how to salvage the evening. Then the doors from the kitchen swung open and Ilara stepped through. A hush fell over the room once more. She wasn't wearing the stained apron or the ruined blouse. She was in her simple black slacks and the black camisole, an outfit that should have been informal. But on her, it looked as severe and official as a uniform. Her posture was different. Her shoulders were back, her chin was high, and her stride was no longer the hurried, deferential shuffle of a waitress, but the measured, confident pace of a commander. She moved with an unnerving grace, her eyes fixed on one point and one point only, Table 7. Croft saw her coming and his smirk returned. "Well, look who's back. Decided you want that $100 after all? I knew you'd see sense." Ilara didn't respond. She stopped beside his table, her presence a sudden cold vacuum in the warm ambient air. She didn't look at his date, or at the half-eaten food, or at the still proffered $100 bill. She looked directly at him, her gaze so intense it was almost a physical touch. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice perfectly modulated, carrying through the silent room. "You made a mistake tonight." He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "I think you're the one who made the mistake, sweetheart. Spilling a vintage like that? You'll be lucky if you're still employed tomorrow." "My employment is the least of your concerns," she said softly. And then it began. A single pinprick of red light appeared on the knot of Julian Croft's silk tie. It was so small, so insignificant, he didn't notice it at first. Then another appeared, this one green, on his right lapel. A third, red, blossomed on his forehead, right between his eyes. His date gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Croft's eyes followed her gaze, down to his chest. He saw the dancing dots of light. He frowned, confused. What is this? Some kind of joke? A light show? Another dot appeared, and another, and another. Red and green laser sights, pouring in through the restaurant's large plate glass windows from unseen positions on the rooftops across the street. Within 5 seconds, Julian Croft's chest, neck, and head were a terrifying mosaic of dancing lights, a constellation of death. There were dozens of them. 50 to be precise. Each one represented a high-powered rifle, a cold eye behind a scope, and a steady finger on a trigger. The restaurant was utterly silent. You could have heard a napkin drop. The clinking of cutlery had ceased. The music seemed to have faded away. Every patron was frozen, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Marco stood paralyzed by the Metra D stand, his face the color of ash. Julian Croft's bravado evaporated like mist in a desert. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a waxy, pale yellow. His jaw hung slack. He slowly raised his hands, his movements jerky and terrified. He tried to speak, but only a dry croak emerged. "You seem to have attracted some attention," Ilara said, her voice still unnervingly calm. Kyle's voice was a steady presence in her ear. "Target is panicked. Vitals spiking. No external threats detected. The floor is yours, Spectre 1. Who are you?" Croft stammered, his eyes darting wildly between Ilara and the windows, as if he could see the snipers who held his life in their hands. "I'm the woman you decided to humiliate for sport," she replied. "But that's not the answer you're looking for, is it? You want to know who has 50 elite marksmen aimed at your chest because you were rude to a waitress." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The answer is, you've been a very, very stupid man, Julian." She didn't just know his last name, she knew his first. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "You think your money makes you untouchable," she continued, circling the table slowly, her movements as fluid and dangerous as a panther's. The laser dots tracked her, some of them momentarily crossing over his terrified date, who was trying to shrink into her chair. "You think you can bully and bribe your way through life. You run Croft Innovations, a legitimate tech firm, but we both know that's just a front, don't we?" Croft's eyes widened in sheer terror. This went far beyond a disgruntled waitress. "We know about the back-channel sales," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "The guidance system components you've been selling to blacklisted regimes through shell corporations in Cyprus and Malta. We know about the accidental data leak last year that crippled your competitor, a leak you orchestrated with a hacker in St. Petersburg. We know about Project Nightingale, the illegal surveillance software you're developing, the one you plan to sell to the highest bidder, regardless of their intentions." Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling the carefully constructed facade of his life. This wasn't a random attack. This was a surgical dissection of his deepest, darkest secrets, performed in public. "How?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "How could you possibly know any of that?" "Because my employers," she said, stopping directly in front of him, "are the people you spend your entire life trying to avoid. We are the auditors of the world's secrets, the ghosts in the machine. And you, Mr. Croft, have just failed your audit." She reached out and calmly picked the $100 bill from his paralyzed fingers. She didn't crumple it. She held it delicately, as if it were a piece of contaminated evidence. "You offered me this for my troubles," she said, her eyes boring into his. "Let me make you a counteroffer. You are going to transfer $5 million to the Waitstaff Benevolence Fund, an account number I will provide. You will do this tonight. You will then divest yourself from Project Nightingale, wiping all data and destroying all prototypes. You will sever all ties with your overseas partners. You will walk out of this restaurant, get in your car, and you will never, ever show your face in this city again. If you do, or if you speak of this night to anyone, these little lights will come back, and next time, they won't just be a warning. She tucked the $100 bill neatly into the breast pocket of his $2,000 suit. "A tip," she said with a ghost of a smile, "for your future cooperation." She turned to the rest of the silent, terrified restaurant. "My apologies for the interruption," she announced, her voice returning to a level of professional courtesy that was now utterly chilling. "Everyone's meal tonight is on the house. Please, enjoy your evening." With a final dismissive glance at the broken man in the chair, she turned and walked back towards the kitchen, her mission accomplished. In her ear, Kyle's voice was laced with something that sounded like admiration. "Psychological warfare complete, Spectre 1, target neutralized. Standing by for exfil." But as Ilara pushed through the kitchen doors, a sudden jarring thought struck her. It was too easy. Men like Croft, men who dealt in the shadows, were arrogant, but they weren't usually this foolish. Why would he risk making such a public scene in a high-end restaurant? It was sloppy. Unless he wasn't just trying to humiliate a waitress. What if he was trying to send a message to someone else? What if he thought the restaurant, or she, belonged to a rival? Before she could process the thought, her private receiver chimed with a different tone. It wasn't Kyle. It was a Priority 1 encrypted signal, a channel that hadn't been used in over 2 years. A channel she recognized with a cold dread that eclipsed even her earlier rage. A deep, gravelly voice, a voice that had shaped her entire existence, filled her ear. "Ilara, it's good to hear your voice again. It seems your vacation is over. Welcome home." It was her father, and in that moment she knew Julian Croft wasn't the predator. He was the bait, and she had just taken it. The locker room, once her sanctuary from the chaos of the restaurant floor, now felt like a cage. The adrenaline from the confrontation was draining away, leaving behind a cold, heavy dread. The voice of her father, Silas Vance, echoed in her mind, not just in her ear. It was the voice of her creator, her mentor, and her jailer. The architect of the gilded prison she had fought so desperately to escape. "Father," she said, her own voice sounding foreign and strained. She stripped the tiny receiver from her ear and placed it on the bench beside her, as if that could create some distance. But she knew it was futile. He was in her head. He was always in her head. "Don't sound so grim, my star," Silas's voice purred from the device, smooth and dangerous as polished granite. "You were magnificent. A bit theatrical for my taste, but effective nonetheless. 50 assets. You always did have a flair for the dramatic." "They were your assets, not mine," she retorted, her voice sharp. "The Damocles Protocol, your golden leash. You knew I was here all along." "Of course I did. Did you really think I would let my greatest creation wander the world unprotected? I let you have your little game of normalcy, Ilara, playing waitress, living in that dreadful little apartment. I indulged you. But I always knew you'd come back. It's in your blood." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "I didn't come back. You dragged me back. Croft, this wasn't random, was it?" The silence on the other end of the line was her answer. It was a calculated pause designed to let the truth sink in. "Julian Croft is a small man with large, dangerous appetites," Silas finally said. "He has been on our radar for months, but more importantly, he has been on the radar of our competitors, specifically the Meridian Syndicate." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. Meridian. They weren't just competitors, they were the antithesis of everything her father's organization, Aegis, stood for. While Aegis operated in the grey areas of global security, a private intelligence agency that blurred the lines between corporate, political, and military interests, they had a code. A twisted, self-serving code, but a code nonetheless. Meridian had no code. They were agents of pure chaos, arms dealers, traffickers, and terrorists for hire who thrived on destabilizing entire regions for profit. "What does Meridian have to do with Croft?" she asked, already guessing the answer. "They were his new business partners," Silas explained. "Croft's Project Nightingale isn't just surveillance software. At its core is a predictive algorithm that can anticipate market shifts, troop movements, and political unrest with over 90% accuracy. It's a weapon of unimaginable power. In Meridian's hands, it could topple governments, start wars. They were set to acquire it from him in less than 48 hours. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. And Croft's performance tonight. A test, Silas confirmed. Meridian suspected this restaurant was a neutral ground, possibly owned by a rival family. They instructed Croft to cause a scene, to poke the bear and see who reacted. They wanted to know who controlled this territory before they made their move. They expected a response from some brutish mob enforcer. They did not expect a response from you. The humiliation, the wine, the $100 bill, it was all a script, a stupid, brutish test, and she had walked right into the middle of it. Her father hadn't just allowed it to happen. He had used it. He had seen the collision course and had done nothing to stop it, knowing it was the one thing that could shatter her carefully constructed peace and force her to activate the protocol. "You sacrificed me," she whispered, the accusation hanging heavy in the small room. "You put me in his path." "I put a queen in the path of a pawn," Silas corrected her, his voice devoid of any apology. "And you reacted exactly as I trained you to. You took control. You reasserted your dominance. You reminded the world, and more importantly, yourself, of who you are. Now the game has changed. Meridian knows someone powerful is watching. They're spooked. This gives us an opening." "An opening for what?" "What do you want from me?" "What I have always wanted. For you to take your rightful place. Croft is a loose end, we'll deal with him. But the Nightingale prototype is still in play. It's secured in the central server core at his corporate headquarters downtown. Meridian will be desperate to get it before we do. I need you to lead the retrieval team, Elara. I need you to go in, secure the asset, and erase any trace of its existence." It was an order, not a request. He was pulling her all the way back in. No more aprons, no more feigned subservience. He wanted the weapon he had forged. She thought of Marco, his kind, panicked face. She thought of the quiet mornings in her apartment, the simple pleasure of a cup of coffee before a shift. The life she had bled for, metaphorically and literally. He was asking her to burn it to the ground. "No," she said, the word tasting of rebellion. "I'm done. Send Kyle. Send your other teams. My life here is over thanks to you, but I won't go back to being your soldier." "Oh, Elara," Silas sighed, a sound of paternal disappointment that had haunted her childhood. "You are thinking too small. This isn't just about Aegis. This is about the lives you claim to cherish. What do you think Meridian will do when they get their hands on Nightingale? They will unleash chaos. The very people you've been serving wine to, the innocent bystanders in this city, they will become collateral damage in wars they don't even know are being fought. Your friend, the manager, Marco, isn't it? He has a wife, 2 young daughters, a lovely family. It would be a shame if they were caught in the crossfire when Meridian decides to send a message." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. He wasn't threatening Marco's family himself. He was merely stating a fact. If she refused, the consequences would spill out and poison the small, beautiful world she had tried to build. He was leveraging her own morality against her. It was his favorite checkmate. A wave of helpless fury washed over her. She was trapped. She had always been trapped. Her escape was just an illusion, a longer leash than she'd realized. "Where and when?" she asked, her voice flat and defeated. A hint of triumph entered Silas's tone. "Kyle is en route to your location now. He will be your handler and tactical support. He has the full briefing. The operation is tonight, Croft Tower, midnight. I'm glad to have you back, Spectre 1. The line went dead. Elara stared at the receiver. Spectre 1, a name she hadn't heard in 2 years. It was her designation within Aegis. A name that meant ruthless efficiency. A name that had been whispered in fear in the back alleys of Prague and the boardrooms of Tokyo. A name she hated. The locker room door creaked open. A tall, lean man with short-cropped dark hair and serious grey eyes stepped inside. He wore a simple, dark grey suit that couldn't quite conceal the athletic build of a man who lived and breathed combat. In his hands, he held a black Pelican case. It was Kyle. He had been her shadow for her entire life, a childhood friend from within the Aegis training program, her partner on a dozen operations, and the man tasked with watching over her during her self-imposed exile. He looked at her, his expression a mixture of professional respect and personal regret. "It's good to see you, Elara," he said, his voice the same calm, steady tone from her earpiece. "Is it, Kyle?" she asked, her eyes tired. Is it good to see me like this? Back in the cage? I never wanted this for you, he said honestly, but he was right about one thing. You were magnificent out there. He placed the pelican case on the bench. But your father's intelligence was incomplete. The situation has changed. Ilara looked at him, a new sense of alarm cutting through her exhaustion. Changed how? Kyle opened the case. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was not the tactical gear she was expecting. There was no weapon, no comms unit, no black jumpsuit. Instead, there was an elegant, sequined evening gown, a pair of diamond earrings, and an invitation embossed with the Croft Innovations logo. Croft is hosting an emergency gala for his top investors tonight, Kyle explained, his face grim. He's trying to do damage control to project strength after you. Rattled him. Security is on high alert. A frontal assault on the server room is no longer viable. The only way to get close to the terminal is to go in through the front door. He looked from the dress back to her face. Your mission is no longer retrieval. It's infiltration. You're going to a party. The transition was jarring. 3 hours ago, she had been Leah, the waitress, covered in cheap perfume and expensive wine. Now she was a stranger in her own skin, staring at a reflection she hadn't seen in years. The woman in the full-length mirror of the mobile command vehicle, a converted luxury RV parked in a discreet alley, was Ilara Vance in her purest, most weaponized form. The sequined gown Kyle had given her was the color of midnight, clinging to her form like a second skin. It was both elegant and tactical. The fabric was interwoven with a micro-thin, signal-dampening mesh, and subtle alterations had been made to conceal the tools of her trade. A whisper-thin lockpick set was sewn into the hem. A garrote wire was disguised as a bracelet, and the heel of one of her Jimmy Choo stilettos contained a powerful single-use EMP charge. The diamond earrings were not just jewelry. They were her new comms link to Kale and the rest of the team. Her hair, usually tied back in a simple, functional ponytail, was now styled in a complex, elegant updo. Her face, scrubbed clean of the minimal makeup she wore as Leah, was now a mask of sophisticated allure, with smoky eyes and a bold red lip. She was a weapon disguised as a socialite. The disguise was perfect, and she hated it more than anything. How do I look? She asked, her voice flat. Kyle stood by the van's main console, a bank of monitors displaying blueprints of Croft Tower, security patrol routes, and live satellite imagery. He turned and looked at her, and for a moment the professional mask slipped. He wasn't her handler. He was the boy she'd grown up with, the only person who understood the weight of the name Vance. You look like you're about to burn down the world, he said, a sad smile touching his lips. It's a good look for you. Don't get sentimental, Kyle. It's just a dress, she said, turning from the mirror. Walk me through the plan one more time. He nodded, his focus shifting back to the mission. He tapped a screen, bringing up a 3D schematic of the tower's penthouse, where the gala was being held. Your invitation identifies you as Evelyn Reed, a representative from a Swiss holding company looking to invest. Your legend is solid. It will get you past the front door. The party is your camouflage. You need to mingle, observe, and find an opportunity to slip away. He highlighted a route on the schematic. The main server room is 3 floors below the penthouse, directly beneath Croft's office. The office itself is your access point. It has a private elevator that requires Croft's biometric signature, thumbprint and retinal scan. Obviously, that's not an option. So how do I get down? Ilara asked. Behind a large abstract painting in the office is a manual override panel for the service elevator shaft. That's your way in. The problem is the office itself. It will be locked and guarded. The security is state-of-the-art, pressure plates on the floor, laser grids, audio sensors. And Croft will be at the party playing the gracious host, Ilara finished for him. I need to get him out of the room. Exactly, Kyle confirmed. We need to create a diversion. Something big enough to draw Croft and his personal security away from the main floor, giving you a window to access the office. I'll be your eye in the sky, monitoring communications and security feeds. Once you're in the office, you'll have 90 seconds max to bypass the security, access the panel, and get into the elevator shaft before the system flags an anomaly. 90 seconds, she repeated. It was tight but doable. And the diversion. "Leave that to me," Kyle said, his expression grim. "It won't be subtle. When you see it, you'll know it's time to move. Once you're in the server room, you'll download the core data from Nightingale and then initiate a thermite charge to wipe the physical drives. Simple data retrieval and destruction." "Nothing is ever simple," she murmured, picking up the small jewel-encrusted clutch that matched her dress. It contained a data spike and the miniature thermite charge. A black town car with tinted windows pulled up beside the RV. It was time. "Comms check," Kyle said, tapping his own earpiece. Ilara touched one of her diamond earrings. "Loud and clear," she replied. The sound was crystal clear, a direct link to her only ally. "Good luck, Ilara," Kyle said, his voice softening again. "Luck is for amateurs," she replied, the old Aegis mantra coming to her lips unbidden. She stepped out of the RV and into the waiting car, leaving Leah, the waitress, behind for good. Croft Tower was a monument to corporate vanity, a shard of glass and steel that pierced the night sky. The lobby was a sea of black ties, designer gowns, and the clinking of champagne flutes. The air hummed with forced laughter and the quiet murmur of billion-dollar deals. Ilara, as Evelyn Reed, moved through it all with practiced ease, nodding at faces she didn't know, accepting a glass of champagne she wouldn't drink, and smiling a smile that never reached her eyes. She spotted Julian Croft near the grand staircase, surrounded by a sycophantic circle of investors. He looked haggard. The terror from the restaurant still lingered behind his eyes, but he was masking it with a frantic, over-the-top joviality. He was a man desperately trying to convince everyone, most of all himself, that he was still in control. His personal security detail, 3 burly men in ill-fitting tuxedos, hovered nearby, their eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Ilara began her slow, calculated orbit of the room, mapping sightlines, counting guards, noting camera placements. She was a predator in a room full of peacocks. Every smile, every nod was a part of the hunt. "I've got eyes on you," Kyle's voice murmured in her ear. "You're clear. No one's paying you any special attention. Croft's security is focused on the entrances. They're expecting a threat from outside, not inside." "Amateurs," she whispered under her breath, taking a slow sip of water. She needed to get closer to the office wing. She feigned a sudden interest in a piece of modern art, a chaotic splatter of paint on a massive canvas that hung on the wall leading to a restricted corridor. As she pretended to study it, she scanned the hallway. A single guard stood before a set of mahogany doors, the entrance to Croft's private office. A keycard scanner and a biometric pad glowed on the wall beside it. "That's your entry point," Kyle confirmed. "The guard is on a 15-minute rotation. We need to time this perfectly." For 20 minutes, Ilara played her part. She engaged in a brief, vapid conversation with a tech billionaire about the future of cryptocurrency. She complimented a formidable-looking woman on her necklace. She was invisible, another beautiful face in a room full of them. All the while, her senses were screaming, every nerve ending alive with tension, waiting for Kyle's signal. Then it came. A sudden, jarring alarm blared through the penthouse, not a fire alarm, but a security alert, a series of harsh electronic shrieks. Emergency lights began to flash, casting the opulent room in strobes of red. Panic erupted. Guests cried out in alarm, champagne glasses shattered on the marble floor. "Diversion initiated," Kyle's voice said calmly in her ear amidst the chaos. "I've triggered a false breach alarm in the sub-level parking garage. Reports are coming in of an unauthorized vehicle breaking through the barricades." As predicted, Croft and his security detail immediately snapped to attention. "Lock it down," Croft yelled, his voice tight with panic. "Get me to the security hub, now." He and his 3 guards pushed through the panicked crowd, heading for an elevator on the far side of the room, away from his office. This was her window. "He's moving away from you. The office wing is clear. The guard is being pulled to the main floor. You are go, Ilara. Go now. Your 90-second clock starts the moment you touch that door." The world seemed to slow down. While everyone else was scrambling in panic, Ilara moved with calm, fluid purpose. She set her glass down and walked briskly, but not running, towards the now unguarded corridor. She was just another guest, seemingly looking for a way out. She reached the mahogany doors. She pulled the thin, flexible lockpick from the hem of her dress. The electronic lock was the first obstacle. She pulled a small device from her clutch, pressing it against the keycard scanner. It was a high-frequency scrambler that would disable the reader for 10 seconds. The light on the panel flickered from red to green. One down. She placed her hand on the biometric scanner. This was the clever part. Her clutch bag had a thin layer of conductive material that had lifted a perfect copy of the Chief of Security's fingerprints when she'd brushed past him minutes earlier. It was an old trick, but a reliable one. The scanner beeped, and the heavy door clicked open. 75 seconds, Kyle's voice urged. She slipped inside, the door closing silently behind her. Croft's office was vast and sterile, with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the glittering city. The security systems were live. A faint, barely visible grid of red laser beams crisscrossed the room. She didn't hesitate. Years of training took over. She moved like a dancer, her body twisting, ducking, and contorting through the laser grid in a deadly ballet. Her stilettos made no sound on the polished floor. 50 seconds. The system is registering your weight, but it's calibrated for a man. It hasn't triggered an alarm yet. She reached the far wall and the large abstract painting Kyle had described. She lifted it from its hook. Behind it was the steel panel. It was a simple, numeric keypad lock. "The code is his daughter's birthday," Kyle said. "Whoa, 814, he's a sentimental fool." She punched in the numbers. A green light flashed. She wrenched the heavy panel open, revealing the dark, greasy void of the service elevator shaft. The noise of the party, the alarms, it all faded away, replaced by the hum of the building's machinery. 20 seconds, Ilara. They're realizing the garage breach was a false flag. Croft is turning back. There was no time for finesse. She hooked her clutch bag onto a maintenance pipe, kicked off her heels, and launched herself into the darkness of the shaft. She caught a thick service cable, the rough metal scraping her hands. Below her was a 3-story drop to the roof of the service elevator car. Just as she swung her legs around to begin her descent, she heard the office door burst open. "She's in here. Seal the shaft." Croft's voice screamed, filled with rage and disbelief. Heavy steel shutters began to slam down from the top of the shaft entrance. She had seconds before she was sealed in, or worse, cut in half. "Go, go, go!" Kyle yelled in her ear. Letting gravity do the work, she slid down the cable, the friction burning her palms. She landed hard on the metal roof of the elevator car, just as the steel shutters slammed shut above her with a deafening clang, plunging her into absolute darkness. She had made it. She was in. But she was also trapped, 3 floors down, in the heart of the enemy's fortress, and they knew she was coming. The simple infiltration was now a fight for survival. The darkness in the elevator shaft was absolute, thick and suffocating. The only sounds were the frantic pounding of her own heart and the distant, angry shouts from the office above. She was blind, exposed, and her primary escape route was now sealed. "Ilara, report. Are you okay?" Kyle's voice was tense in her ear, cutting through the silence. "I'm fine," she breathed, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She ran her hands over the roof of the elevator car, searching for the emergency access hatch. Her fingers, raw from the slide down the cable, found the recessed latch. "They know I'm here. They'll be sending a welcoming party." "Already on it," Kyle replied. "They've locked down the elevator, but I'm slicing into the building's maintenance systems. I can override the floor lock, but only once. I can send you down to the server room level, but I can't bring you back up this way. Once you're down there, you'll have to find another way out." "One-way trip." "Understood," Ilara said, bracing herself as she worked the latch. "Just get me there." The heavy hatch groaned open. She dropped down into the empty elevator car, landing silently on the balls of her feet. The car lurched suddenly, then began a smooth, rapid descent. Kyle was a ghost in the machine, her digital angel. "Approaching sub-level 3. Server room is on your left when you exit. I'm looping the corridor security cameras, giving you a 60-second window of invisibility." "But Ilara." "Croft's head of security, a man named Roman, is ex-Spetsnaz. He's good. He won't be fooled by the looped footage for long. He'll be coming for you." The elevator slowed to a halt with a soft chime. The doors slid open to a pristine white corridor, brightly lit and eerily silent. It felt like a laboratory or a morgue. A heavy reinforced steel door at the end of the hall was marked Server Core. Ilara moved quickly, her bare feet making no sound on the polished concrete floor. She reached the door. It was a formidable obstacle, with a digital keypad and a magnetic lock capable of withstanding a bomb blast. "Kyle, I need the code," she whispered. "There is no code," he replied, a note of strain in his voice. "It's a randomized quantum encryption key that changes every 10 seconds. There's no way to crack it in time." Ilara stared at the impassive steel door, a dead end. Above, she could hear the faint sound of footsteps, of men mobilizing, Roman and his team. "Then we go to Plan B," she said. "We don't have a Plan B," Kyle shot back. "I do," she said, looking down at her feet. At the stiletto heels she had kicked off in the office, specifically the one containing the EMP charge. They think the Nightingale data is the prize, but the real prize is the hardware it's stored on. They'll have protected it against external electronic attacks, but they won't be expecting an attack from the inside. A sudden, brilliant and terrifying idea bloomed in her mind. "Ilara, what are you thinking?" Kyle's voice was sharp with alarm. "I'm thinking I can't get in, but I can make them open the door for me," she said. She turned and ran back to the elevator, which Kyle had thankfully left open. She looked up into the dark shaft. "Kyle, can you access the fire suppression system for this floor?" "Yes, the halon gas system, but triggering it will vent the oxygen from the entire floor. You'll have less than a minute of breathable air." "Perfect," she said. "Trigger it on my mark." She retrieved her heels from the shaft, her mind racing. She ran back to the server room door and knelt down, examining the small ventilation grate near the floor. It was her only way in. She took the heel with the EMP charge and with a sharp crack broke it open, revealing the small cylindrical device within. It had a simple pressure-activated trigger. "Kyle," she said, her voice low and urgent, "this is going to get loud. Kill my comms right after I give the signal. I don't want this thing frying the implant in my ear. Re-establish contact when it's safe." "Understood. Ilara, be careful." "Careful is for another lifetime," she murmured. She wedged the small EMP device into the ventilation grate, aiming it towards the interior of the server room. Then she took a deep breath, held it, and spoke her last word before the storm. "Mark." Instantly she heard the hiss of the halon gas system kicking in from the vents in the corridor ceiling. Red lights began to flash, and a computerized voice droned, "Fire alert! Level sub-3. Evacuate immediately." She didn't wait. She took her other, perfectly good stiletto and slammed the sharp heel down onto the exposed EMP trigger. The device emitted a high-pitched whine that lasted for less than a second, followed by a silent, invisible pulse of energy. The lights in the corridor flickered and died, plunging her into darkness again. The emergency lights, powered by a different circuit, stayed on. Inside the server room, she knew all hell was breaking loose. The EMP blast, contained within the metal room, would have fried every active electronic circuit that wasn't hardened against it. The server racks, the cooling systems, the internal security cameras, all dead. The quantum-encrypted lock on the door, its tiny brain scrambled, would have defaulted to its failsafe. "Open." A heavy thunk echoed from the door as the magnetic lock disengaged. It worked. Gasping for air in the rapidly thinning atmosphere, she pulled the heavy door open and stumbled inside. The room was a cathedral of technology, with rows upon rows of server racks, their indicator lights now dark and lifeless. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt plastic. The only light came from the red emergency strobes in the corridor. Her lungs burned. She needed to be fast. She ignored the main servers and headed for a single, isolated rack in the center of the room. Encased in a secondary layer of protective housing. Project Nightingale. This unit would be hardened against EMPs. Its lights were still blinking. She pulled the data spike from her clutch and slammed it into the main port. A small screen on the spike lit up, showing the data transfer progress. As it worked, she retrieved the thermite charge. It was small, no bigger than a deck of cards, with a magnetic base. She slapped it onto the side of the server's casing. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Black spots danced in front of her eyes. The lack of oxygen was taking its toll. Come on," she rasped, watching the progress bar on the data spike crawl towards 100%. The spike beeped. Transfer complete. With her last ounce of strength, she twisted the dial on the thermite charge, setting the 30-second timer. She ripped the data spike from the port and staggered out of the server room, collapsing into the corridor and taking a huge, life-giving gasp of air. Behind her, she heard a faint hiss. Then a brilliant white light filled the server room, so intense it was visible even through the thick steel door. The thermite charge was burning at over 4,000 degrees, melting the server rack and the Nightingale hardware into a molten slag. The asset was destroyed. Her earring clicked back to life. "Lara. Ilara, do you read me? I've got multiple hostiles converging on your position. Roman's team is coming down the west stairwell. You have to get out of there." She pushed herself to her feet, her body screaming in protest. She had the data. The hardware was destroyed, but she was 3 floors underground, with an elite security team bearing down on her. She looked down the corridor. At the far end was a janitorial closet, a long shot. She sprinted towards it just as a team of 4 men in full tactical gear, led by a bear of a man she assumed was Roman, burst through the stairwell door. "There she is," Roman yelled, raising his weapon. They opened fire. The sound of automatic weapons fire was deafening in the enclosed space, bullets sparking off the walls around her. She dove into the janitor's closet, slamming the flimsy door shut just as a spray of bullets riddled the wood. She was trapped. The closet was a dead end. This was it. Then her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw it. On the back wall of the closet, half hidden behind a mop bucket, was not a concrete wall, but a metal grate. An old, forgotten ventilation shaft. It was small, cramped, and filthy, but it was a way out. With bullets punching through the door, she kicked the grate with all her might. It popped out of the wall with a rusty groan. She scrambled into the dark, narrow space, crawling on her hands and knees into the guts of the building, just as Roman kicked the closet door off its hinges. She was alive, but as she crawled through the darkness, the data spike clutched in her hand, she realized the most dangerous part of her night was just beginning. She hadn't just stolen a piece of software. She had stolen the key to a global war, and now 3 different factions, Aegis, Meridian, and Croft's remnants, would be hunting for it. And she was right in the middle. The ventilation shaft was a maze of metal and darkness, a claustrophobic tunnel filled with the smell of dust and stagnant air. Ilara crawled on, the rough metal scraping her bare knees, the elegant gown now ripped and filthy. Every sound from outside the shaft, the shouts of Roman's team, the distant alarms, was a spur driving her forward. She was moving blind, guided only by Kale's voice, a calm beacon in the chaos. "Okay, I have you on the building schematics," he said, his voice a low murmur in her ear. "You're in the primary HVAC trunk line for the sublevels. Keep moving forward for another 50 meters. There should be a vertical shaft that will take you down to the parking garage. It's your only way out." "And Roman?" she asked, her breathing ragged. "He's smart. He's not chasing you into the vents. He's splitting his team to cover all the primary exit points on this level. He knows you have to come out somewhere. He's turning the sub-level into a kill box." Ilara's mind raced as she crawled. Kyle's diversion in the parking garage had failed. Roman's men would be swarming the area. Walking out the front door was not an option. She reached the vertical shaft. It was a straight drop down into blackness. She peered over the edge, her night vision, honed by years of training in darkness, picking out the faint outline of a large ventilation fan about 20 feet below. "That fan vents directly to the P2 level of the garage," Kyle confirmed. "But it's active. The blades are spinning. I can try to hack the power control, but it's on a separate, hard-wired circuit. It will take me at least a minute." "I don't have a minute," she said, hearing the telltale sound of Roman's men prying open another vent cover down the corridor she'd just left. They were tracking her. She looked down at the spinning blades, a silver blur in the darkness. They were moving fast enough to shred steel, but there was a rhythm to them, a pattern, a tiny fractional gap between each blade as it passed. It was insane. It was impossible. It was her only chance. Keep them busy, she told Kyle. She took the data spike and secured it in the small of her back, tucked into the remains of her dress. She took a deep breath, judged the timing, and jumped. For a terrifying second, she was in freefall. The roar of the fan blades grew into a deafening scream. Time seemed to warp, the spinning blades slowing in her perception. She saw the gap. She twisted her body, making herself as small as possible, and plunged through. A blade sliced past her hair, so close she felt the displaced air on her cheek. She landed hard on a concrete floor, rolling to absorb the impact. She was in a small maintenance room in the parking garage. She was out. Ilara, my God, I lost your signal for a second. Are you there? Kyle's voice was frantic. I'm here, she gasped, getting to her feet. P2, where's my exit? The town car is gone. The garage is compromised, but I have an alternative. Section G, Space 42. There's a black Ducati motorcycle. The keys are taped under the seat. It's untraceable. Get to it. I'll meet you at the fallback point. She peered out of the maintenance room. The garage was on high alert. Guards were sweeping the rows of cars, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. She could see Roman directing them near the main ramp. She stayed in the shadows, moving from concrete pillar to concrete pillar, a ghost in a ruined ball gown. She was a stark, almost comical contrast to the grim functionality of her surroundings. She finally saw it. The sleek black motorcycle, a promise of speed and escape. She reached the bike, her fingers fumbling under the seat for the keys. Just as her hand closed around them, a voice spoke from the shadows behind her. Going somewhere? She spun around. It was Roman. He wasn't holding a gun. He was just standing there, his massive arms crossed over his chest, a look of weary respect on his face. Two of his men appeared from behind a nearby SUV, their weapons trained on her. She was cornered. You're good, Roman said, his voice a low Russian-inflected rumble. In another life, we might have worked together. But tonight you work for a thief, and Mr. Croft wants his property back. The data spike, hand it over, and I might convince him to make your death quick. Ilara's mind was a whirlwind. She couldn't fight all three of them, not unarmed. But she couldn't surrender. The data on that spike was too important. My employer is far more powerful than Julian Croft, she said, stalling for time, her eyes darting around, looking for any advantage. You're on the losing side of this war, Roman. Roman chuckled, a humorless sound. There are no sides, only interests, and my interest is my paycheck. The spike. Now. He took a step towards her, his men tensed, their fingers on their triggers. This was the end of the line, but as she looked at Roman, a thought struck her. A detail from the briefing. Ex-Spetsnaz. He wasn't just a corporate thug. He was a professional soldier. And professional soldiers understood one thing above all else: leverage. Before you kill me, she said, her voice changing, becoming colder, more businesslike. You should know what's really on this drive. It isn't just about Project Nightingale. Roman paused. Go on. My father is Silas Vance, she said. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Roman's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his professional veneer. Even his men shifted their weight uneasily. The name Aegis was whispered in the circles they ran in. It was a name that meant power, reach, and ruthlessness on a global scale. Silas Vance doesn't just want the Nightingale data, Ilara continued, pressing her advantage. He wants the people who are trying to buy it. This data spike doesn't just contain the software, it contains a Trojan horse, a tracker. The moment Meridian accesses this data, it will ping their location, reveal their entire network, their key personnel, their funding sources, everything. She was lying, a desperate, brilliant lie born of pure survival instinct. The spike contained no such thing. But it sounded plausible. It sounded exactly like something Silas Vance would do. You give this to Croft, she said, looking Roman straight in the eye, and he, in his desperation, will sell it to Meridian. And when he does, Aegis will burn them to the ground. And they will burn everyone who helped them, including you, Roman. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Is Julian Croft's money worth that? She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was a mercenary. His loyalty was to himself. He was weighing the immediate reward against the potentially catastrophic risk. Or, she said, offering him a third option, you let me walk out of here. You tell Croft I got away. You disappear. Aegis will have no quarrel with you. You get to live and collect your next paycheck from someone who isn't about to start a war with a superpower. Roman was silent for a long moment, the only sound the hum of the garage lights. He looked at his men, then back at her. He had seen the truth in her eyes, not the truth of the Trojan horse, but the truth of the power she represented. He had seen what she was capable of upstairs. He knew she wasn't just some corporate spy. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. Go, he said, his voice a low growl. You have 2 minutes before I find your trail leading to the east exit. Get out of the city. He lowered his arms and stepped back into the shadows. His men, looking confused but obedient, lowered their weapons. Elara didn't wait for him to change his mind. She swung her leg over the Ducati, the key sliding into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a thunderous sound in the concrete tomb. She gave Roman one last, acknowledging nod, a silent agreement between two professionals. Then she twisted the throttle and shot out of the parking space, the bike fishtailing before finding purchase. She sped through the garage, up the ramp, and burst out into the cool night air of the city, leaving Croft Tower and the life of Leah the waitress behind her in a cloud of exhaust and broken promises. She was free, but she was also more hunted than ever before. She had the data, she had a head start, but she was a rogue agent with a prize the whole world wanted. Her father would be hunting her to bring her back into the fold, Meridian would be hunting her for the data, and Croft, what was left of him, would be hunting her for revenge. As she weaved through the late-night traffic, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon, she knew her escape from the tower wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a new, far more dangerous war. And this time she was fighting for herself.